We continue with sociology A level. Today we go into social identity and change. So for identity itself, identity simply means who we think we are and what people call us. So what we want people to call us or what we think we have. That is what identity is. So we have different types of identity. We have the class identity. So we're going to start with the class identity anyway. So for class, we're talking about ways in which we are being we are being recognized. We are being how they call us. We are being, I need to use a word there, ways in which we are being addressed according to the class in the society. So we go anyway. Class identities. Social class can be difficult to define, but Compton in 2003 suggests that occupation is a good general measure that can allow us to define simple class groupings, such as working, middle, and upper class. Occupation can also suggest which ways in which class identities develop out of different work-related experience. So, for occupation is any productive activity which a person engages permanently to save his productivity time. That is what occupation is. And according to Compton, he felt finding a word for class might be difficult, but we can use our job to determine or to decide the kind of group we are according to class in the society. That's according to him. So we're going to start with the working class. For the working class, traditional working class identities are fixed or centered around manual work and manufacturing industry. A further dimension to class identity came from the largely urban and also closed communities within which traditional working class lived. Here, people of a similar class occupation and general social outlook had their cultural beliefs continually reinforced through personal experience and socialization. The working class self could be contrasted with the middle upper class order. In such circumstances, class identity was built not just around what people were or believed themselves to be, but also around what they were not. More recently, however, Compton has suggested changes to the nature of work. Before we go into Compton's suggestion, identity is not just what you think you are, it is also what you think you are not. So you are identifying yourself not to be a certain person, not to be a certain group. So that is what we are talking about here. So class identity, it does not simply talk about the kind of class you are, either the working class or the upper class or the middle class, but also telling us to understand that you don't belong to that class. So that is what Compton is saying. So Compton suggested that we have a decline in traditional manufacturing industries, a rise of services industries such as banking, computing, and a range of lesser status service jobs. So these changes has brought about movement in the class ladder because things have started changing. Before now there was industrialization. After now there's the decline in industrialization going to services. So a lot of people do not manufacture anymore. They go into service. And as soon as you go into service, it might simply change your outlook, who you are in the society. So this had led to the emergence of new working class, which I just said now. It changes our outlook as who we are supposed to become. The creation of a comfortable home and family life rather than an end in itself. So the service sector does not, it's more advanced and it gives you more income than the manufacturing. So that's why in all developed economy, they talk most of this in all developed society. Let me not use economy here. In all developed society, what they do mostly is services, because in services you pay more, you get more, and that will shift you, will move you up the ladder. So that's the point they are making here. So because the service sector is coming in, so people now have more money to spend to themselves. So they are able to create a comfortable life for themselves that change their outlook. So that's for the working class. So the working class has changed over time because there is decline in manufacturing and there is emergence of the service sector. So that is about the working class. Is it clear? Good. Then we go to the middle class. So the middle class identities are constructed around a range of occupational identities. These include professionals like teachers, doctors, lawyers, high level of educational achievement with personal autonomy, freedom of action, and decision making. So managers involved, for professionals, I just talked about them, For managers, they involved in the day-to-day running of private and public companies as identity. An identity book suggests that combines career progression, decision making, power and control over others, and the organization of work routines. So the middle class, they are above the working class. Here, these are people that are professionals. They have autonomy. They can make decisions about their life without really relying on the capitalist. Then another example is the manager. When we talk about managers, these are people that decide, that make decisions about the day-to-day running of a business. So they are also some top people in the organization, in the industry, or in the society. Then we have intellectuals, such as university lecturers who reflect an academic identity dealing with knowledge and information service. So we have the lecturers. They have, like teachers too, they have intellect. So they are still part of the middle class because they showcase skills, they showcase talents, they showcase what they've got by impacting knowledge to students in the society. So they are part of the middle class. The consultants, people that you can always seek advice from, they are also part of the middle class. Routine service workers, such as shop assistants who represent an expanding identity group situated at the bottom of the middle class hierarchy. They may have lower earnings and level of skill than some higher working class occupation, but they qualify as middle class on the basis of their non-manual work. So we have the service workers. They are above the higher working class group because they are part of the middle class based on the fact that they don't do manual work. They are still in the service sector. So everyone in the service sector is considered as a middle class worker, a middle class person in society. I think the point is clear there. Then now we go to the upper class. Upper class identities are based on two major groupings. The landed aristocracy, which is a relatively small group whose traditional source of power is historic ownership of land. They have a lot of land, yeah, and its political connection to the monarchy, like to the king, the royalty. In the past, this made it the most significant section of the society. Over the course of the 20th century, the economic power and influence of the aristocracy may have declined, but there remains a significant upper class section of society. So we call them the upper class because they have access, and they have access to land, and they are linked to royalty. So though these days we don't really have those things happening, but we still have the ruminants of such situation. Then we have the business elites, which represents a major section of the upper class. One characterized by great income and wealth based on ownership of significant national, international, and global companies. So for the elites, they have large businesses. So, and that means they have economic power. So they have wealth. They can buy whatever they need to buy. They can buy land. They can buy property. They own a lot of these things. So they were able to acquire wealth through their intellectuals and the West. It's not ascribed to them. That means they have to work for it. So we call them elites because they do not. It's not generational. It's true. They work hard. They were able to, put together wealth based on their skills and knowledge together, or their entrepreneurial skills. So that's about the upper class. So Sev and Zeli noted that 21% of the UK's total wealth is owned by the wealthiest, 1% of its population. 7% of the nation's wealth is owned by the least wealthy 50%. So it's contrasting here, When you have few people controlling a large wealth, that is the point they are making about the UK wealth there. But in India, a similar pattern of income equality emerges. The top 10% of wage earners earn 12 times more than the bottom 10%. So 42% of Indians' 1.2 billion population live on around $1.25 dollar per day. Well, $1.2 per day, I think. I think I would consider that as still relative poverty, not absolute. It's relative poverty because $1 per day is not bad though. It's not. When you talk about, it's not bad, yeah.
It's bad.
No, what's the dollar rate? That's 8 dinars. No, you have to compare the dollar rate with the currency.
Oh.
So that's what you need to think about.
So probably $1.25 in Indian currency as well.
So that's the point. So we wouldn't say it is poverty, we could call it relative poverty, which means certain individuals still are better than others.
Okay.
So that's what the point is there. So, but all in all, there's income inequality in UK than in India. Do you get the point? The wealth, the gap between the rich and the poor in UK is larger than the gap between the rich and the poor in India. That's the point I'm making there. I think it's clear. Is it clear, please? So on a global scale, David know that the world's richest 1% own 40% of the total global wealth. Of this 1%, 60% live in just two countries, the US and Japan. Whoa. I think class is clear. So basically when we talk about working class people. Working class are those in the society that does manual work.
Yeah.
Then we have the middle class, who are those that work, that does services,
And then elites.
and the elites, which are the upper class.
Yeah.
We have the elites, which are the upper class, and we
That's
have
work, yeah.
those that are in the royal family or the aristocrats, who are also part of the upper class.
Yeah.
So the aristocrats, they earn, they are living, they have their wealth through generation from maybe they were able to, what do we call it, inherit land,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they are part of the royal family, and part of the royal family owns the land anyway.
Yeah.
Then the elites, who are these people? These are people
Because
that
they're
have
wealth now.
intellectual. They are intellectuals. They've gathered their wealth through, skills and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's clear.
Yeah.
So any question about class? Done. So that is class identity.
Sure.
So we'll go to the next identity, which is about gender. So when we talk about gender identities, we're talking about being born as a man or a woman. So that's what gender identity is. So Cornell et al. In 1987 argued that we are not born a man or a woman, really. We become men and women through the social construction of gender identities. In other words, while biological gender refers to the physical characteristics that cause people to be labeled male or female, gender refers to the social characteristics given to each gender. Lips in 1993 argued that differences in male and female identities do not occur naturally from biological differences. Gender identities differ historically and cross-culturally, which means that they are both learned and relative. So Cornell suggests that there are two forms of dominant gender identity. So before we go into Cornell, according to Cornell, before we go into his suggestion, he felt that people were not born as man or woman. It means we develop to become a man and a woman based on social construction. That is the point they're making. And when we talk about social construction, we're talking about the way the society is being built. So the society built up, it was built, and we become what we become in that society. So we have the hegemonic masculinity, where traditional forms of masculinity are based on a variety of physical and mental characteristics. For example, men are encouraged to adopt a particular body shape that ideally emphasizes physical strength. Mental characteristics include idea about men as leaders, providers, being unemotional, rational, calm, cool, and so on. So this is hegemonic, which means you have to portray the look of a man, both in physique, your IQ, things you do, and the way. That is hegemonic. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's hegemonic. That means you become a man because you portray all those features of a man.
Okay.
That's the point there. Then we have the emphasized femininity, which relates to the idea that female identities were traditionally defined by how they could accommodate the interests and needs of men. So the dominant identity was one that merged and complemented hegemonic masculinity. Women were regarded as essentially passive, emotional beings whose identity was expressed in the service of others. For Kitchen in 2006 called this a complicit femininity because it is defined by male needs and desires. So for Cornell, he emphasized that he felt that women comes to emphasis on femininity, which means you are being defined based on the opposite situations of the male. You are emotional, you are attached to things, you are not supposed, you don't have the physical ability to do certain things. So that is the definition of femininity. So according to Cornell. So now we have to go to, I think you understand what Cornell is talking about. He doesn't see the man in man. He sees the man if he has certain features.
Yeah.
And he doesn't see the woman in woman. He sees the woman when she is unable to have certain features that a man has. I think you got the point there. Okay. So now we go to male identities. Although hegemonic masculinity is dominant, alternative masculinities exist. Shell suggests that following forms of masculinity, we have the subordinate masculinities, which are generally seen as lesser forms of masculinity, particularly for men who are unable or unwilling to perform hegemonic masculinity, such as those with physical disabilities. So now, part of the male identities, we have the subordinate masculinities, which are those that could not really do what those that have the physique to do. So maybe they have disability, so they cannot actually do those things that hegemonic masculinity will do. So we call them subordinate masculinities. I think you get the point there. Then we have the subversive masculinities, which involve an alternative masculinity that challenges the undermines hegemonic masculinity. An example here might be a serious student who works hard at school rather than being part of a gang that is disruptive in the class. So here, when you look at part of the gang that is disruptive in the class, you're like, yeah, that's the man in us.
Yeah.
So we have to prove that we are guys.
Yes.
So, but for these guys, for this group of people, they are subversive because they question that hegemonic masculinity. They question, no, this is not supposed. They challenge it. So they feel it is not right to do. So these guys, they are guys too, but that group of guys that will bring that do not conform, they challenge them. Did you get the point or not? We call them subversive. Subversive because they challenge hegemonic. Hegemonic guys are guys that have the physique and they have that strong. They are irrational. They do things at will because they are men. So they are making an example about subversive here, which is men that are men also, but they don't use their own physicality to cause chaos. Rather, they use it to put the society into conformity.
It's like toxic masculinity.
Do you understand? So they challenge, they question hegemonic masculinity in people. So they made the example of a serious student here. If you are a serious student, it means you are hardworking. So being intelligent is real hard work, and it shows that you are that man. You're man enough to. But you being intelligent, instead of you to be hegemonic, you become subversive because you don't want to use your strength to be irrational. Do you understand? So being a gang, being part of the gang, makes you to be hegemonic because you think you have the physique to do that. But for him, he doesn't want to do that. He challenges those doing that. That is subversive. I think it's clear. So then we have the complicit masculinities, which refers to newly feminized masculinity, such as the new man, men who combine paid work with their share of unpaid housework and childcare, taking on aspect of the traditional feminine role. This type of masculinity sees women as equal and occurs. Cornell argued that because as women have become more powerful, male identities have begun to change. So we call them complicit masculinities because they take part of, they do domestics too. They take care of child, they do chores, out chores too. So they are complicit. So they combine both masculinity and feminine duties. They combine them together. So they are called complicit. It refers to as complicit masculinity. Do you get complicit here? So then we have the marginalized one, which refers to men who feel they have been pushed to the margins of family life due to long-term unemployment. For example, they no longer feel able to perform what they see as the traditional masculine roles of money earner and family provider. So the marginalized ones are those people that they feel they are unable to continue the male role, the masculine role. So they felt the society has pushed them to a situation that have pushed them to a point that they can no longer perform as a man. So they are called marginalized men. Do you understand? Do you understand marginalized here? Any question about marginalized? So we have hegemonic, we have hegemonic, we have complicit, we have marginalized. What else do we have there? No, we have
Yeah. Just work.
no, we have the emphasized femininity. We have it.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
no.
emphasize
No, we have
that.
subversive. Sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
subversive masculinity, which are those that challenges or questions hegemonic masculinity.
Yeah.
So that's about male masculinity. Do we have any other one there? So we have female identities now. Female,
Yeah.
are you there? So Anna Oakley suggests that female identities were shaped in childhood. Girls and boys are socialized differently into gendered roles that involve gender identities. This happens in several ways. Girls and boys are treated differently by their parents, dressed in different clothes, and given different toys to play with, and so on. Oakley suggests four main ways in which children are socialized into gender roles. One, by manipulation. For example, by stressing the importance of appearance for girls and of being brave or strong for boys. So one of the ways in which gender is being constructed in the society is through manipulation, where the girl will be reminded every now and then that this is how she should be dressed, and the guy will be reminded every now and then that this is how he should look. So This is manipulation. So you give different toys to different gender. This is still part of manipulation. Then we have canalization, which is channeling children's time and attention onto different activities, such as the girls helping their mom in the kitchen and the boys, having time to play football or sports. That's what canalization is. That means the activity they do.
Yeah.
So you shape them based on what they have been exposed to. That is canalization. Manipulation is giving them different things to make them feel like a man or woman. Then we have the verbal appellation. For verbal appellation, what children sees their parents, okay, now, how children are spoken to, the way you speak to a girl, different from the way you speak to a guy, being harsh on girls or on boys, and being slow or emotional with girls. So that is verbal appellation. Then by different activities, what children see their parents and others doing leads to idea about what is appropriate for each gender. For example, that cooking and cleaning are for women. So, and also it could be by different activities. So the gender can be shaped based on what you see your mom doing and what he sees his dad doing. So, oh, my dad does this, so I will continue to do what my dad does. And every now and then I wake up and I see my mom, this is what she does. So I continue to do what my mom does.
Yeah, also here it says for telling a girl she's pretty, which is like different from a guy.
Yeah, handsome, for a girl it's pretty. So these are part of appellation too.
Yeah.
I think it's clear.
Yes.
So according to Oakley, there are three main forms of feminine identity in contemporary societies. So let's see if we can talk about them anyway. Contingent feminities, which are framed and shaped by male beliefs, behaviors, and demands. Normalized identities. For example, involve women learning to play a secondary role to men as mothers, girlfriends, partners, and the likes. Chambers argue that such identity continually struggle with the problem of producing a femininity that will secure male approval. So for the contingent of femininity, when talking about contingent, it's talking about what the needs are in the society. So the first one is normalized identity, which talks about the reliance of women on men. That, it's a woman and this is what she needs to do. She needs to be submissive, she needs to be that, she needs to be this. Then we have the genderalized identities, which are made through male eyes and fantasies. In these types of identity, women are objects that exist for male gratification. So here we're talking about the need for women. That's the point they're making there. I think it's clear. So we move on to the second one, which is assertive. Assertive identities reflect the changing position of women in many societies. They involve women breaking free from traditional ideas about femininity, but not completely setting themselves apart from men. For Froyum, in 2005, suggests that assertive feminists are adopted to resist male power without actually threatening to overthrow such power. Then, for assertive identity, here, women try to reprise or try to become what they are supposed to. They want to become free to have a life for themselves too. But they are not doing that to overthrow women or men, but they are doing it because they felt they still have things to offer to the society, which without having that freedom to do it, they will be deprived of it. So that is assertive. You get assertive identities here. So we have different types of assertive identity, which includes girl power. According to Olos, suggests that this emphasizes gender as fun and the importance of female friendship. This identity represents a way of coping with masculinity, but other women are excluded from this identity. So here, the girl power, which makes you to be among guys at any point in time, and because it's a woman, the feeling becomes different when the woman or the lady is part of the group where men are. So it changes the feeling, and maybe men become like, oh, we just have to compose ourselves here. So the girl power changes the attitude of men. The girl's presence changes the attitude of men. That's the girl power. I think it's clear.
Yeah.
Then the modernized feminities that relate to a slightly older age group. This locate newfound female economic and cultural power within the context of family relationships. The assertive aspect here is a desire for personal freedom and expression. What McRobbie termed individualism, liberty, and the entitlement for gender self-expression within the context of traditional gender relationships. So for the modernized feminities, here it relates to the power a woman has in terms of what she brings to the family. So here it's different from the other one. The first one we talked about is girl power, which is always aligned to young ladies. But here we're talking about slightly older people,
Mothers.
like mothers and grown-up adults, like that are working, that are middle class.
Mhm.
So they have that power too. They have that. They have that. They have responsibilities that makes men to like look up to them and allow them the freedom they want.
Mhm.
Then we have the aging feminities, which assert the right of elderly women to be fashionable, active, and gender bent. So here for aging feminities, we are talking about the grown-up. They are adult. They are old women.
Yeah.
They have experience.
Yeah.
They have seen everything in life. So you can't question anything they do.
Yeah.
So that is aging feminities. I think it's clear. And the last one is autonomous femininity, which involves competition with men on female terms. For example, points to female individualism as part of a new gender regime that frees women from traditional constraints such as pregnancy and childcare. Autonomous women are likely to be highly educated, successful, professional, middle class person, and career focused. So for the autonomous feminities, here we're talking about women that can decide, that can make decisions themselves
Mhm.
without without the need for men. So these kind of people are those that are highly educated. They are in high position in the society because of their skills. They are intellectual. They are successful women. They can also be lawyers, doctors. They have a professional life, and they can be
Basically,
career
they don't
focused
need to
person.
rely on a man.
What?
They don't need to rely
They don't
on a
rely
man.
on men, so they are they have autonomy.
Yeah.
They can make their own decisions without any interference from men. So those are the classes of women we have. So we have the first one, which is not the assertive. We have the contingent. We have the assertive. The contingents are the need for men.
Mhm.
Then we have the assertive, which have power,
Mhm.
too, maybe because of their age. Their age, maybe the girl power. We have those one we are modernized. We have the aging one. Then we have the autonomous femininity. And what else do we have? I think that's all about gender.
Mhm.
That's all about gender. Okay. So let me see what we need to know more about gender. And for female, we have canalization, manipulation. We have verbal appellation, and we have different activities, which is linked to what you see your mom doing or what I see my dad doing. Then for the male ones, we have hegemonic. For the males one, we have hegemonic. We have emphasized femininity. No, hegemonic. No, we have marginalized. Sorry, we have marginalized. We have the subversive
Conflict.
and the complicit masculinity. So that ends gender identity. So we have two already. So we'll continue with identities. We're going to ethnic identities. So when we talk about ethnic, we're talking about where we come from, our origin, our race. So let's say anyway. When talking about ethnic identity, it is helpful to keep two things in mind. Ethnicity is not the same thing as race, as Osario argues. This simple biological notion of race is wrong. There is no solid scientific evidence of genetical different racial groups. There is anyway, but let's just leave that for another day. We should avoid thinking about ethnicity in terms of minorities. So the Center for Social Welfare Research says that for all of us, identity is in some sense ethnic in that we have diverse origins related to how we are perceived and treated by others. So ethnicity is our origin, where we come from. It's still part of our race, but we don't want to talk about race because when it is being linked to race, it brings about racism and it doesn't look good in the society. So ethnicity therefore refers to a combination of cultural differences in areas such as religion, family structure, beliefs, values, and norms. So we're going to start with one at a time anyway. But according to Winston, he suggests that ethnic identities develop when people see themselves as being distinctive in some way from others because of a shared cultural background and history. Song in 2003 claimed the first about Winston, he said it sees ethnicity as you seeing yourself culturally inclined to others. So this is my way of life. It is not your way of life, so we are different. So that is ethnicity, according to Winston anyway. Then for Song, he claims that this is often expressed in terms of distinctive markers such as a common ancestry and memories of a shared past. A sense of ethnic identity is based on symbolic elements such as family and kinship, religion, language, territory, nationality, and physical appearance. Ethnic identity does not necessarily relate to any actual evidence of cultural distinctiveness as a group. The key factor is whether people are conscious of belonging to the group or not. So, according to Song, he believes about our consciousness, our conscious awareness about where we belong. So if I see myself as being part of this society, then I'm part of this society. But if I see myself as not being part of this society, I am not. That is according to Song. So ethnicity, as a source of personal and social identity, is built on a range of ideas that include referring to country of birth, that's nationalization, by birth anyway, and the sense of a common geographic location. So here, where I'm being born, so I can see myself as being identified as an individual from that country, or because I share a geographic location with a certain group of people, and that location, the name of that location, I am linked to that location. Traditions and customs that contribute to unique cultural practices that distinguish one ethnic group from another. So we could still see ethnic identity as the difference between our tradition, our way of our beliefs and their beliefs. That is also part of ethnic. Then shared histories and experiences as dividing sense of identity as with victims of slavery in the case of Black, Caribbean, African identities, or the Nazi Holocaust in the case of the identities. Okay, so we can still talk about our ethnic based on
History.
past history, where we hail from. Then the last one is our religious beliefs, celebrations and traditions that connect people on the basis of shared cultural practices such as common forms of worship. So how we worship, we are Muslims. So because we are Muslims, we can see ourselves as a Muslim society. So that means we can relate as being Muslims. So because we are Muslims, we have the same idea. We share the same belief because we worship in the same way. So that could be linked to our ethnicity. Is it clear? Is it clear, please? So it could be through the country of birth, or because you share certain geographic location. It could be based on traditions or customs, like what you do, your beliefs. It could be part of our history, where we hail from, and it could be because we worship in the same way. So these are ways in which we can group our ethnicity. Then, unlike racial identities, ethnic identities can be negotiated. Their nature and meaning can change because of external and internal factors. For external factors, which might include contact with other cultures, internal factors might be a clash of ideas and experience between different age, class, or gender groups within a particular ethnic group. So, for ethnic, why we won't talk about racial identity is because when we talk about racial identity, it is not flexible. It is linked to specific group. So it means if you are not part of this group, you can't be part of this group. You can never be part. You cannot become that group. So that is racial. But when it comes to ethnic identities, they said it can be negotiated because we have some internal factors and external factors. The internal factors such as sharing the same idea, knowledge, or sharing the same, being part of, linked to another group. Oh, I'm a Nigerian, then married to an Egyptian. So we start sharing the same link. So that means we're not looking at it through the race. We're looking at it through ethnicity. That's the point they're making there. So the internal factors might be a clash of ideas, the experience we have. Then the external, which is just what I talked about. Maybe we share festivals together, we do festivals together, we eat, we have similar dishes and the rest. So these ones are ethnicity. We can't call it racial identity because if we call it racial identity, we cannot eat the same food. We cannot share the same idea. We cannot share the same knowledge. Do you understand? Yeah. But if it is ethnic, we can share ideas, we can share knowledge, we can share food, we can share culture. Yeah. I can participate in your culture, you can participate in my culture. Yeah. So that is ethnicity. So according to Winner in 2008, he argues that an important aspect of ethnic identity is how they are defined in relation to other ethnic groups by constructing a sense of difference, which establishes boundaries for a particular identity. Ethnic boundaries may be positive, conferring a sense of belonging to a definable cultural group, or may protect. As a way of fighting racism and discrimination, for example, boundaries may also be imposed through cultural stereotypes about ethnic groups and identities. That means what you call them, what you tag them. So this may in fact reinforce a stereotype group sense of identity. So according to Wimmer, he sees ethnic identity as a way to protect and differentiate. So here, when you set a boundary, you're not setting that boundary because you are difficult. You are setting that boundary because you need to protect your culture too. Do you understand? So when you set boundary, you are protecting your culture, you are protecting your society. it doesn't simply mean you are discriminating. So that is what Rima is saying, that yeah, ethnic identity can be defined into two different differences too. But we shouldn't see that difference as a sort of wanting people far away from us, but making them to understand the values of who we are, what we are too. So that's why he said you can define the culture, it can define your cultural group or at the same time protect you. So it defines us, oh, we are Libyans, and we have boundaries because we need to protect our culture. So that is the point. Is it clear? So another way in which ethnic identities can be imposed relates to how minority identities can be defined by majority ethnicities in terms of their otherness, how they are different from us. While this relationship strengthens both majority and minority ethnic identities, it can also result in minority ethnicities being portrayed as a threat in two ways. So another way to define ethnicity is how we define the minority group, from how we relate to the minority group and how we relate to the majority group. So there's always going to be a minority group in the society. So how do we relate with them? How do we deal with them? So that could talk about more of ethnicity too. Then it becomes a threat based on the following reason. One, cultural, where minority beliefs and practices are set up as challenges to a particular way of life. So it could become a threat because the minority groups are always like they are isolated from the society, and as a result of that, their culture might become might be seen as unusual to the majority group. So they will not be able to practice their culture, and even if they want to do, it becomes difficult for them to portray it or to let people see what their culture is. So that's one problem about minority groups. Then the physical, where in countries such as Britain and the US, following the September 11 World Trade Center attack, the media framed and references the threat in terms of Muslim and terrorism. So here, it's not about just minority. Now we're seeing the ethnicity which comes from how we worship as Muslims. So after the attack in 2011, the Americans, they see Muslims as terrorists. So that's the point there. So based on the fact that we have identity, that we could be seen as Muslims. So I portray a Muslim name, you portray a Muslim name. So whenever they see the Muslim name, they see it as being a terrorist. Do you get the point here? Because we are linked. We could be linked as through ethnic, based on the religion we do. So because we are Muslims, they don't see if I'm a Muslim, I'm from Nigeria or wherever. But because I'm a Muslim, based on my ethnic, they believe we have the same mentality, mindset, and ideology. So they would not see me as a Nigerian, they would see me as a Muslim and a terrorist, based on the fact that the attack was carried out by Muslims. So that's about the physical. I think it's clear, right? Then we have age identities after now. So we go to age identities. On one level, age is simply a matter of how many years someone has been alive. But sociologists are interested in the meanings attached to age. Age is a social construction, which means that what it means to be young or old or any age depends on the society at that time. In Western cultures, age is worked out by counting from the year of birth to the current time or until death occurs. Age is considered to be very important. It is the basis on which individuals are able to do certain things or are prevented from doing other things. So age. Age is seen as how old or young we are. And if it is about how old or young we are, it determines, and it also depends, it becomes a yardstick to what we can do and what we cannot do. That is what they are saying there, according to the Western cultures. But in many traditional societies, in contrast, people may not know how old they are. Chronological age may not be recognized or may be considered unimportant. Nobody cares about age because they don't have the numbers. So the passing of time may be measured not by date, but by important events or the passing of seasons. More important is the age set people belong to. So the group of people with whom they go through important stages in life, especially initiation into adulthood. In many traditional African societies, for example, there are three main stages in men's life: as children, warriors, and elders. Boys of roughly the same age are initiated into adulthood and become adults at the same time. The initiation may involve instruction in tradition and law, an adult's responsibilities and ordeal or test of strength. So for the warrior, you become a warrior if you have that strength and power to to do things. Maybe you can hunt, you can fight at war and the rest. So it depends on your strength anyway. So if you don't have that strength, you might not be considered as adult. So you won't be able to do what adults do. Unlike the modern day tradition, modern day society, age is important and it determines what we do and what we don't do. But in the traditional day, based on what they are saying, is that age doesn't matter to them. It's your strength and your responsibility that makes them to think you are adult or you're not. I think the point is clear there. So for industrial societies, in contrast, usually place a great emphasis on age in terms of years. Some rights and responsibilities are only given to individuals when they reach a certain age. So industrial society, like the society we have now, it's about age is important, and that determines your responsibility.
Yeah.
So if you are not that age, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's about the industrial society. Status in industrial society is closely based on occupation and income. Children are usually unable to work and therefore dependent on adults. Other people may be prevented from working and so are often on low income, which means they may have less status than African elders who may be just as infirm but are usually seen as sources of knowledge and experience. So the older people, they might not have that ability to physically do things, but they are seen as people with long years experience. They have knowledge because they've passed through different stages of life. So that's their status in the society. For members of an age group who share a common experience of growing up at the same point in history are an age cohort. They grow up together. They grow up and grow old together, experiencing the same significant events. This means that whatever differences of gender and ethnicity they may be, everyone born in a certain year will belong to the same age cohort throughout their lives. They will, for example, be leaving school and later entering retirement at around the same age. So they are members and they are cohorts because they were born, they live, and they were raised, and they work together. So whatever happens in that society, they are of the same level. So we have the older people. That's about the age identity based on who you are, a boy or a girl, or either boy or girl, but as what you can do in the society. So the traditional society sees your strength and responsibility before you can become an adult. And for the modern day society or the industrial society, they place emphasis on age. So age determines your responsibility. And for the old men, they don't have physical power, but they have experience and they respect them. They put them in high place in the society based on their experience and knowledge. So older people. In many societies, older people are respected and appreciated for the guidance based on experience that they can offer to the community. Elders, for example, can be a source of wisdom and can help to solve disputes or conflicts. This aspect of old age has been less obvious in modern industrial societies where communities and extended families are often weaker. Based on the idea that we now live in a global village, a group called the Elders, first brought together by Nelson Mandela in 2007, offers its collective wisdom to help solve some of the world's problems and to inspire younger people to act on them. So, the older people, in societies, we see the older people as people with wealth of experience, and when there is conflict, they are the ones that we need to call upon to solve most of these problems. So that's about the older people. So they said more people survive into old age than used to be the case. Old age in modern industrial society now covers such a huge age range that it has become widely accepted to think of it as being subdivided. So we have the young elderly, which is between 65 to 74, the old elderly, 75 to 84, and the very elderly, which is 85 and above. So why do we have this age group? This helps us to recognize that there can be big difference within the age category. One important role of many old people is as grandparents or even great-grandparents. In modern industrial societies, more people today know their grandparents than was the case in the past, because people live longer than in the past. So whilst an average woman in the mid-18th century could expect to die 12 years before her last grandchild was born, a woman of the 70s could expect to live 25 years after the birth of her last grandchild. According to Anderson in 1985, page 70, we're going to get there. because there has been a trend in many developed countries for people having children later in life. It may become normal for people to become a grandparent in their 80s if they have if they have had their children late and their children do too. There's very little there's a very wide variation in the ages at which people become grandparents from their late 30s to advanced old age, which leads to variation in the role and identity of grandparents. So for grandparents, it changes now because you could even be a grandparent at an in your mid 50s because you gave birth at a younger age and your child also gave birth at a tender age. So the industrial society has changed the look of things which we call grandparent things. So grandparents, you might be a great grandparent and still be alive these days, but this doesn't happen in the traditional days because during the traditional day it takes a longer period of time before you get married and also development based on healthcare, accessibility to health facilities were not like that. Things have advanced these days, unlike the traditional days. So some people might die younger, so they won't be able to even see their grandparents, their grandchildren, and some people they might not be able to they don't have that tendency to stay longer. Unlike these days, there is a better health facility, it makes people to live longer than expected. So the what do we call it? The life pattern. It's not life pattern. The life expectancy. The life expectancy these days is longer than those days. So that makes it easier now. So now they said better health at a later age has led to many older people being able to play an active role in family life as grandparents, rather than being seen as a burden, needing to be financially supported and cared for by their adult children. Many grandparents are able to play a positive part by, for example, contributing financially, especially if they are still working. So some grandparents are still working though, looking after young children, especially when their parents, they have both parents, working parents, playing a part in the primary socialization of their grandchildren, integrating those children into how they should behave in the society. Sometimes you could stay with your grandparents or stay with them over the weekends. With their experience, they tell you things, they train you and how to behave in the society. It's part of their role. Providing nurturing and emotional support. So they take care of you, your well-being, maybe when your parents are not available. Helping to keep cultural tradition alive. Passing on stories and wisdom to their grandchildren. They let you to understand what happens in the past, and by that you are able to respect the values of the society, the values of their family, the culture, because you've been told. It is only things that you're not told that you forget. So in Africa, they used to say the only time you can keep the tradition going is when you expose it, when your kids have access to it. So as soon as the generation coming stop having access to the tradition, your tradition, then the tradition dies. So that's what they are saying, that you keep the cultural tradition alive by only making sure that they have access to information about the past in your tradition. So while some grandparents live close to their children and their families and help out on a daily basis, for example, taking the role of an unpaid child minder if both parents or a single parent are working, many live too far from their children for this. Both parents and children tend to lead full lives, and time with grandchildren may have to be planned and may involve specific activities. So some grandparents live closer to their children, and some live far away. So those that live far away, the grandchildren might see their grandparents maybe during events, festival, and the rest. So that's the point they are making here. So the role of older people in families is explored further in the section on age and family life. That's chapter 3. So go to the children now. So I think the old ones are clear now, right? The elderly, the young elderly, the old elderly, and the oldest. So now we go to children. So children, the way in which childhood is socially reconstructed has, according to historic research, changed completely in the last 500 years. Philip Harris has gone so far as to argue that childhood is in the modern sense did not exist in the Middle Ages. Children were not seen as different from adults. They wore the same clothes, walked alongside adults, and shared the same reactions. Before now, they are saying, according to Philip, he says there's no difference between the adult and the child because they wear the same clothes, they do the same work. They might not have the same strength, but they are exposed to the same situation. That is the point they're making there. But with invention, so the invention of the printing press, the growth of formal education created a new separate world of childhood. Today, whole professions, educational psychologists, pediatricians, teachers, child psychiatrists, etc., are based on the assumption that children are not yet fully developed people, that they are vulnerable and need protection and guidance. Harris says this idea of childhood is a modern invention or social construction. So, according to Harris, he believes these days there's social construction which makes the society to see child as something that we need to protect. Childhood as something that we need to protect, that it's vulnerable, that we need to take care of. So one of the most striking aspects of a child's identity is that it is defined in relation to adults. Adults have authority over children, and children are largely dependent on adults. Children have to obey their parents and their teachers and may be physically punished if they do not obey. Hood Williams argues that there are three types of adult control of children. So we have the space, where children are required to stay within spaces, that means they don't go out of the boundary.
Yeah.
So they may be told to play in the house or allowed to go to a certain distance from home. Children in traditional societies often have greater freedom to roam over a wider area. In Western societies, concerns over safety related to both traffic or danger from other people, sometimes known as stranger danger, means that children are watched over more and kept closer to home. So the space thing is, in the traditional society, children, because they even aren't, they could roam about. They could go anywhere, anytime. But these days, in the modern day society, there's this stranger danger thing, which doesn't give the parents that rest and rest to allow their kids to move away far from where they are, where they can see them, because they can be exposed to things that it's not part of the family culture. So children are vulnerable, so they don't want them to go further than their boundary. That is about space. Then time. Parents often control children's time, such as when they must go to bed or how long they spend on homework and watching television, TV. Children have to go to school for set hours. Adults also decide whether a child is old enough for particular activities or privileges. So time also decides the childhood. If time will decide what activity you can perform, what activities you cannot perform, what things you can have privilege for and what you don't have privilege for. That's about time. Then bodies. What children wear, their hairstyle, and the ways they sit, walk, run, etc. are also controlled by adults. So in the childhood, they control what you do. As a child, you'll be controlled. What you do, how you do, where you go to is being controlled by the parents. That's the point. Unlike the traditional society where you are allowed to do whatever you need to do. So there's more freedom in the traditional society than in the modern society. So children have ways of resisting adult authority. Children can act up, that is, behave as if they were adults, perhaps by smoking or swearing. Children often look for ways to give the impression that they are older than they really are. They can also sometimes act down. So acting up, here you're talking about behaving as if you've grown up.
Yeah.
That is acting up, like behaving like an adult, thinking that you can do things yourself, you can make decisions yourself. That is acting up. Then acting down, that means you are behaving like more of a child now, let's say. So acting younger than they are in order to get some of the concessions given to the very young. Both forms of resistance can be seen as being about children trying to escape from being seen as children. So children trying to escape from being seen as children, they do this through resistance, either by acting up or acting down. I think it's clear. Then we go to teenagers. The idea of a youth or teenager is a relatively modern one. It was only in Western societies in the second half of the 20th century that people of this age were thought as a distinctive category. Growing influence by the 1950s meant that teenagers had money to spend and industries, such as popular music and fashions, developed to meet the demands of this new market. So the market for the teenagers now. There were concerns that the emergence of this new group meant a generational gap, with teenagers and people of their parents' generation having few shared interests, little in common, and different opinions. So there's this generational gap between teenagers and their parents. So the parents do not witness teenage life. So the teen become something new to them.
Yeah.
So because there wasn't something like that
In their
when in their age. So there's still that missing thing, missing information about
Yeah.
who a teenager should be or what it should look like. So the view. So for functionalists, like isn't thought, view the teenagers' years as a difficult period because they involve status anxiety. Industrial societies emphasize achieved, not ascribed statuses, and therefore young people feel pressured to achieve. One response is to rely on the peer group. They are all so the teenagers, one thing they do to escape being seen as a child is relating with a peer.
Oh, dear.
So they go to the peer group.
Yeah.
So the peer group is a way to escape,
Childhood.
to escape childhood. So that is what they are saying here. So they are after all people who are going through the same problems and anxiety. So with the peer group, you are able to create a group that have the same issue, anxiety as yours. So that becomes an escape route for you guys. So young people therefore tended to share norms and values, even to form a youth subculture. But Essenthal saw this as functional since it helped people through the transition to adult life. So according to functionalists, they feel the teenage peer group or the youth culture is important because it transcends the teenager to adulthood.
Yeah.
So that is according to the functionalists. So they see it as an important part of the society. So, okay. Some breaking of norms, even if teenagers get into trouble with the authorities, was seen as testing of the boundaries of acceptable behavior as young people sought to establish their status and identity. So the teenagers, they try to break rules. Not because they want to break rules, they want to see if it's going to be acceptable or not.
Right.
So they try it. It's a try and error. They try it to see the acceptability. So if it is acceptable, then they go on doing it. But if it's not acceptable, then they have to go back. Just like the decision of the classroom. Oh, we can put our head on the desk. It's a mindset. If it was allowed, then you guys will put your head on the desk. Then you have the freedom to do it. But because it's not allowed, then you push and you start thinking about something else to do. Because I know you guys will be thinking about something else to do. So this view came into question with the development from the 1950s onwards of youth subcultures, which were seen as rejecting or rebelling against the dominant cultural values. For neo-Marxists, they developed the idea of working class youth subculture as resistance to capitalism. Young people were able to rebel because they were less held back than adults by responsibilities. These youth subculture were marked by rejection of mainstream society's norms and values. For example, the music and clothing was often designed to provoke a negative reaction from authority or from older people in general. So a good example of this is the punk style in the mid-70s. So the point about the teenager coming up with a youth subculture is because they need to rebel. They need to go against whoever stops their freedom. So to do this, they need to act up. So acting up is coming up with maybe punk, different hairstyles that their parents will not like, different hairstyles that does not go in line with the culture or the norms of the society. They just have to prove to the society that they can take their own, they can make their own decision. So to do that, they have to act up. They have to do things that does not conform in the society. So that's the point about teenagers. I think it's clear. So that ends identity through gender, through class, through ethnicity and age.